Ahoy, ahoy to all you smooth sailors out there, and welcome aboard the DeckTales podcast. I'm your host and captain, Sammy Catlin, and this is the show where we set sail into the captivating world of ship life. Most of the time, delving into the best and worst experiences of the incredible crew members who call the open sea their workplace, but I'm open to the odd exception as well. Whether we're navigating stunning destinations to weathering unexpected storms, our guests all have stories to tell that will make you laugh, gasp, and maybe even shed an unexpected tear. So if you're a seasoned cruiser, eagerly awaiting your next embarkation, or just curious as to what goes on at sea, DeckTales is your boarding pass to a world of nautical narratives. My guest today, and last one for Season 2 of DeckTales, is Mr. Gary Bembridge, a former global marketing executive turned cruise content creator. I spoke with him about his channel, his backstory, and how he transitioned into a social media legend. If you want unbiased reviews of the cruise lines and what they have to offer, he's your guy. And if you've enjoyed the show so far, then please smash that like button, click subscribe, and hit the bell to get notified whenever I post a new video. Now let's anchor up and dive right in. Hello, Mr. Bainbridge.
Hi there, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Are you okay?
I'm very good, thank you. Yes. We're recording this on a stunning hot day, so it's rather nice.
Is that the reason why you're not characteristically abroad at the moment? Because it's good enough here in the UK?
Well, I do tend to, it's sort of, I do tend to in July and August not travel as much because it's kind of crazy season. Because you go to the Med and it's packed and really expensive. You go to Alaska, it's packed and really expensive. So July, August, I tend to travel less. I'm going on a river cruise in July, but other than that, I'm sort of around. And usually, yes.
You're a long-time cruise vlogger, and the internet's most subscribed to within this niche. So I've heard. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you look at just people who just do cruising, yes, at the moment I am. I'm sure people will overtake me soon because there's lots of up and coming kind of cruising. I mean, you had Emma cruises on not so long ago. I'm sure she'll overtake me at some point. But yes, at the moment I am. Yeah.
It's not a contest. But you've done over 124 cruises.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the number to date, as of today.
Yeah.
And you said in your message to me, unfortunately, I know the kind of podcast you're running, Sam. It's some stories about embarrassing moments, deaths, tragedies, and things that go wrong, and you've not encountered anything like that. So my first book was called Seems Like Smooth Sailing, but you've been on 124 and you've had nothing but smooth sailing.
Yeah, maybe I just take things more on my stride or something. But often people, I listen to other people and they have these stories about strange goings on and weird stuff. Maybe it all just passes over me. I've had pretty smooth sailing. Obviously you have the odd thing where ships get diverted or medivacs or whatever. But I've never had any kind of weird and kind of wacky things happening to me.
Well, what's your secret? How are you able to just avoid or dodge? Is it because your travel, your tips for traveling is basically how to avoid all that sort of stuff?
Perhaps, yeah, maybe it's because I do. I do. I have done, yeah. I plan a lot. I kind of know what I'm expecting, and maybe I think it's probably just because I travel a lot, and maybe I take things on my stride. Because also before I did lots of cruising, I had kind of a global marketing job, so I was traveling all over the world all the time. So maybe it's just sort of I've just carry on, and it all just passes me by. But so often when I listen to some of the stuff people you've interviewed and other people, I always feel like maybe it's maybe people attract more drama or more excitement or something than I do. I don't know.
Well, we're willing it into the universe for you for your next river cruise, Gary.
I think it definitely won't be wildly exciting on a river cruise. No.
Well, really, river cruises are a lot more sort of contained, aren't they? They're a lot more intimate, right? It's not as gigantic as the big cruise lines of the world. Have you got a favorite river cruise line company and a favorite cruise line company, or is that too hard?
No, it's interesting, Sam, because I get asked that a lot. One of the questions people ask me quite early on when I meet them is, do I have a favorite line? And it's not a cop out, but in reality, what I often say to people is a lot of it depends on where I'm going, who I'm going with, why I'm going. So, if I was to choose just for myself, so if I wasn't doing any of this kind of vlogging and stuff and had the budget and stuff, I would tend to go towards small ship lines. So I tend to look at I like Regent, I like Oceania, those kind of things. That would be sort of high on my list. Silver Sea would be high on my list.
Mm.
But if I'm going, say, with my partner who likes big casinos, big production shows, I'm more likely to look at like a Honda America or a Celebrity or whatever. But if I was going with my nephews and their kids, I'd definitely go on Royal Caribbean and Norwegian kind of stuff. So a lot of it hinges around that. Also, where I'm going. So if I'm going to Alaska, I would tend to go on an adult-only ship because Alaska can be rammed full of kids, even on lines that tend to be more adulty. So I look more at a Viking, for example. So a lot of it hinges around that. Certainly when it comes to ocean. When it comes to river cruising, I do have a small group of lines that I really like. So I really like Amur Waterways. They're a little bit more on the expensive side. Or the next one I'm going is Avalon, which is not quite as costly. But Avalon's I like because all the ships are basically the same size on river cruising in Europe because they have to be because it'd be so long, so high, and whatever. So the ships are very similar. But I like Avalon because they are much more active. So they have more active excursions. They have bikes on board. They have a slightly more healthy kind of dining. They have more flexible dining options than the others do. So that just suits more the way that I travel. Because as you said, river cruising is much more regimented, much more kind of set, if you like.
Well, I just wanted to say, just because you've had such a sort of seemingly frictionless ride up to this point, that's why I chose the most dramatic backdrop for your episode. And also, I'm in a tank top because it's like 30 degrees. And it's the first time I'm using an HD camera, which, of course, you won't notice because this is our first time meeting. But up until now, Gary, I've always just used my laptop's inbuilt webcam because I felt like I didn't really have a face for HD. So yeah, I'm putting on my big boy pants today, and I'm braving it out. So
excellent.
it's a first for me. But so you've been on your channel, Tips for Travelers. That's been going for how many years now?
Well, I mean, I originally launched Tips for Travelers when YouTube first started, so right back in 2006.
Goodness.
So, because I'd always wanted, I also got into podcasting really early when podcasting first started in kind of 2005 or something like that. So when YouTube launched, I'd sort of, because I'm a bit geeky and I like all that kind of stuff and playing around and stuff. So when YouTube launched, I'd started posting stuff, and it was mostly because I was still had my global marketing job. I was posting lots of hotel room videos, just random stuff, and just playing around, little short things about trips to Vegas and stuff like that. So I launched it in 2006. I posted my first video, I think it was about June 2006, which was a hotel room thing. My second video was actually a ship. It was a cabin tour on Queen Mary 2. So it was very erratic when I was still working full time. Then when I sort of decided I was going to retire from full-time work, so 2012, I started focusing a little bit more, and became much more focused just on cruising at that time. And then about 2018, I decided, because I still had a podcast and I had a YouTube channel, I was doing a blog, and I thought, actually, no, I'm going to focus way more. And I'm going to focus on YouTube, first of all, because I liked making videos. Secondly, I could see that you could make more money on YouTube than any of the other platforms at that time. And I also made the decision that I wanted to fund all my own travel. So I was being invited by cruise lines and stuff.
I saw
thought,
that,
actually,
yeah.
I want to become, so I want to become totally independent and never go on press trips, never take freebie trips. Yeah. And also because that'd be part of my kind of brand, if you like. You can tell my background's marketing, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted. So that's what I wanted to do. So I thought, well, you need to obviously earn more money if you want to do lots of cruising videos, and YouTube was the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
So then I really doubled down in 2018. So Trips to Travelers really took off in 2018. I mean, it was there before. I was getting maybe 100,000 views a month, so it was still quite big. In 2018, I really doubled down, and then I sort of grew like to millions of views a month. But that's when I really focused, spent lots of time, defining what Tips to Travelers is going to be, who the target audience was, how the algorithm worked, et cetera, changed the way I made videos and stuff. So I started in 2006, focused a bit more on 2012, but really, really launched it properly, I guess, 2018.
So it's taken you over, 12 years to get to the point where it finally boomed. And then another, 5, 6, 7, 8 years on top of that to get to the point where we're at to now.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's interesting because, if I look in 2018, I think I had 3,000 subscribers. And then that's now like 470 something thousand. But it's interesting. It took a while. It gets its momentum. It took a while to get to 100,000. Once it got 100,000, it started accelerating. Obviously, you had the wobble during COVID shutdown time, but then really kicked off after that again. So, yeah.
Well, yeah. So now you're pushing for the 500,000 play button from YouTube, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, they don't have 500,000 play button.
Oh,
What's
you're
sort of bizarre
joking.
is no, you get
I
the button
didn't
at
know that.
100,000, and the next one is 1,000,000.
It's a
But it's
big
also
jump,
yeah, it's a huge jump.
right?
But also in reality these days, subscribers is way less an important number. It's more of a some I know some people who comment on YouTube talk about more of a vanity number because the most important number is views, obviously, because views is where you earn your money. Views is people watching your stuff.
Sure.
And the algorithm used to be very focused on subscribers in the mix. Now, what YouTube do is they focus more on regular viewers. A lot of
Retention.
people will also regular viewers and retention, absolutely. So when I launch a video every week, what they used to say years ago is more subscribers are watching this than usual. What they talk about now is more people who usually watch this are watching it than usual, not watching it as much. So the algorithm focuses on people who often watch in particular channels' videos rather than the subscribers. So subscribers become much less important, but it's still the most public number because it's hard to tell. There are different sites where you can go and look at people's total views, but it's not obvious. That's why people focus a lot on the subscriber number.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, because I remember they obviously this is a very long time ago, around the beginnings of YouTube, they had to restructure everything because it got to the point where everything on a person's homepage was just whatever was the most clickbaity. So if there was a story in the news, somebody would go, right, that's what's trending. I'll make a thumbnail of like the news covering that particular story, but the video will be just like me reacting to it.
Yeah,
And then people will go on
exactly.
it because they've clicked it, and then that will chuck it up the charts because so many people clicked that clickbaity thing,
Yeah,
and then they get annoyed because it wasn't the real news source, and then they would turn it off. So that's
exactly.
when I don't know what year that was.
Yeah, I
That
mean
was a
they
long
did.
time
I
ago.
mean there was. I mean in 2013 they made a big shift to watch time, which was one
Mm.
of the big switches. So they moved before. That's why in those days short videos used to do quite well, but then they switched to watch time, also because they wanted people to stay longer so they could run more ads. A couple of years later, they introduced something to get rid of that clickbait, which is they have now when you look at YouTube is they track what percentage of people are watching after the first 30 seconds, and then they do watch time. So that helps get rid of clickbaits because if people are saying, "Oh my God," something or other, and then people start watching the video and they realize, no, this is just Gary walking through a park rambling about cats or something, and they click
Hey,
out pretty quickly. So,
there's a market
so
for
they,
that.
I'm sure there is, I'm sure, but so they build in lots of measures now to try and get rid of that clickbaity stuff, and that's why in the shift to watch time, and it's interesting because what I always say to people is the most important thing to focus on is how long people watch your video. That is, if you're going to do one thing, and that's one of the big changes I made in 2018 is really looking at retention, like you were talking earlier.
Mm.
The trick also I always say to people with YouTube is you just look at the data YouTube gives you. And if they ever introduce a new measure, you need to understand why and adapt to it because it means it's driving the algorithm what people are watching. Yeah.
Sure. And if anybody is still listening up to this point, because I don't know how good our attention is, I have to admit that I'm quite new to the game, Gary. Obviously, it's a pleasure to have someone as well versed on things like YouTube and podcasting as you are, because I'm trying to build gradually, and up to this date, I've mostly been interviewing crew members. But one thing I do know about YouTube, and this is fact because I had a friend who worked in the industry. Do you remember the song Gangnam Style by
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
the Korean
yeah.
pop star Psy? So that song came out of nowhere, and the manager was the same as Justin Bieber's manager. The first 500 million or 50 million views, it was either, I can't remember. They were prepaid views. So when people saw the video and the view counter, they thought, "Oh, this is going well," and they would listen to it because obviously the view count warranted it. So hey, that's the little insight. I'm sure there's lots of examples of things where that's been the case, but that's just one example that I was very familiar with because obviously I think it was the first video ever to get 1 billion views. Yeah, and that's a long ways away for well for this guy.
Yeah.
But I
I
haven't
mean, and
got number one
YouTube
yet.
now but they sort of now their whole system is much more attuned to people who buy views and because they basically know where stuff's coming from. I mean, it's interesting because I can tell with lots of spam people that also trying to like they're leaving comments so it makes their channel that they're using to kind of sell as subscribers or sell views look more credible and stuff like that. So yeah, but YouTube is so quick on the ball with that.
Mm.
Um,
I'm sure we could talk about YouTube's algorithms and
yes,
subscribers and
forever,
things for a long time, Gary. But
forever.
that's not the theme of DeckTales.
No, exactly.
I've got
Yeah.
to bring it back somehow. So you said what was it? You've got just under 500,000 subscribers, and I've made a couple notes, a couple questions to ask you. So you've got no sponsorships because you want to be an unbiased reviewer of the cruise industry, and I appreciate that. That's good. That's good because there's so many that just sell out, and they'll be just happy to take an endorsement, but it's all at your own pocket. It's your own endorsement, good or bad. You're not bought by anybody. Have you ever come close? Has anybody ever like tempted you with a deal, and you were like, oh,
Yeah, I mean, I get every year I get asked about 11 or 12 times by cruise lines to go on cruises. So I get offered all the time. I mean, people kind of now know cruise lines now know that I don't do it, but yeah, I get asked a lot, or I'll get approached where they say, "Oh, we can see you coming. We'll give you an upgrade to this big suite or whatever," which I also say no to because partly because once you get into that, you actually under the Advertising Standards Authority rules, that would be counted as you have to start hashtagging it ad, which I don't want to do. But also, I've often chosen a cabin because I want to cover that specific cabin. Like I
I
want to
saw
cover a
that
balcony
video.
cabin.
Yeah. And if you're not opted out of an auto upgrade, then you'll go to a cabin that's a nicer cabin, but it'll be in a worse location, like above the theatre. And that's not what you want. You like to be
Exactly.
wall to wall, like five sides each way,
Yeah.
across side by side, above and below. You want somebody else's cabin so that the noise is at the least it's going to be. And I'm guessing you probably want like midship, middle of the ship, right?
Normally, yes, absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also because I've often booked a specific cabin for that reason, but also because that I want to show them the videos. So, like, if a balcony cabin is the main cabin on the ship, that's what I would normally book because that's what people want to see. They want to
Yeah.
watch that. They don't want to watch. That's also why, yeah.
But so you've not had anyone tempt you with an offer that you were kind of like, oh, I could do an endorsement with these guys because they're offering free cake and a sundae or something. I don't know. It's never crossed
Not
your
really
mind.
because not really because it would then kind of it would sort of ruin my kind of brand as it were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be like me as well because I've got this. I'm not going to get a sponsorship or a partnership deal with the cruise line industry or any of them because it's almost like a red pill blue pill thing. Do you want to know the truth? Do you want to just kind of go on without knowing the real sort of side of things? And so because have been guests on that have exposed certain truths, they won't want to do any business with me as long as I keep on going with this type of branding. But I think it's important. I honestly do. That's why I'm doing it. Did you have a chance to listen to the mission statement that I sent you?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't need to repeat myself. That was, I think, pretty clear as to why I'm doing this. But so you've been traveling once a month, every month for the past 25 years.
Yeah, so when I was doing my marketing job, I was traveling that much, partly because I was looking after different countries around the world, but I also had a team in Singapore, in Europe, and in the US. So I was traveling a lot. So yeah, so I pretty much now, and then since I've stopped doing that, now I go roughly once a month. I'll go on a cruise or away. So it's normally about 11 trips a year I'm going on. Yeah,
Once
it's
a
a lot.
month, but yeah, so once a month, every month for 25 years or so. But you've got about over 1,000 videos on your YouTube channel. Do you ever get bored of it all, Gary? You just think to yourself, sod this, I'm going to stay in this week. I'm going to catch up with the EastEnders omnibus.
Well, I definitely wouldn't catch up with the EastEnders. I'm an EastEnders fan. So, but if it was science fiction, that would be a different story.
I
But
should
yeah,
say
so no.
for the American listeners, the EastEnders omnibus, that's just like a weekly roundup of a very London-based soap opera drama
Yeah.
on TV that's been going for a very long time. I wasn't implying that you would be a fan of that, Gary. It's just it's not my cup of tea. But so yeah, you if it was a sci-fi marathon going on, you might stay home
Oh
for
yeah,
that.
no, that'd be a yeah, if it was a Star Trek or something. But so no, I don't. I mean, I always say the good thing about doing what I do is if I decide one day I don't want to do it anymore, I can just stop. And I can just stop. So no, and people often ask me, like, I still don't get as excited for every cruise that I go on, even ones that I don't necessarily go because I'm not just going to enjoy myself. I did a series last year. I went back on all the big ships, which are not my kind of natural thing I do, but I love going on them because seeing what they're doing, seeing how they do it. So I enjoy it both from a enjoyment perspective, but also just seeing what people do perspective. But no, I don't. I still love what I do. And every now and again, I keep saying I'm going to slow down and do less, and that never works out.
Of
Like,
course, you've got the
uh,
bug. You can't stop once you've got the
exactly.
bug.
Yeah.
It's difficult. But you mentioned Star Trek then. Have you ever thought about going on like a Star Trek cruise?
Well, I would love to go on the Star Trek cruise, but every year I kind of get the dates wrong because it's normally going around about February time. So I normally every year I think I'm going to plan because I plan quite far ahead. Like I already planned in 27 my cruises. So I always think I need to keep some space open for it, and I always get the dates wrong. So I would love to go on it. I really like to go on it. Yeah,
Who would you go as
but I haven't been yet.
if you're going to dress up?
What is Well, see, that's the problem because I'm not big into the dressing up thing. I had to talk to some people who've been on, and they're like, you don't necessarily have to. But I feel like if I was going, I would feel I'd need to at least get some Starfleet uniform or something. I'd just probably just go as random Starfleet person, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's an easy costume to be able to commit to. You don't have to get too hot and bothered.
Exactly.
I had a guy on a few
Exactly.
months ago. He said he worked on it, and there were people that were in full prosthetic for the entire cruise. They didn't take it off because it was so much work putting it on that they just
Yeah.
rode it out the whole trip.
Yeah.
And their IDs didn't match what they looked like, so they were
Oh, of course. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
were given a really tough
But I mean, it
time.
does look, I mean, when I look at the videos of people who've been on it, like the dedication is phenomenal, what people do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Or they call them Trekkies, right?
Trekkies. Yeah.
Trekkies or Trekkers.
Yeah.
Either
Trekkies.
either. I don't think it's like potato, but nobody says potato.
Yeah.
What I wanted to
Yeah.
ask was, so you've been doing your channel for a long, 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 long time. Basically, since when I finished working on ships back in 2000. No, I started working on ships in 2006. So that's when you started your channel. I stopped working on them in 2010. So many years later that I've started doing this. But I think one of the main reasons that you have to leave it so long is because there could be some repercussions contractually,
Right.
you know. So I've bided my time up to the point where I'm like, yeah, I think it's about time. And COVID was a perfect example. When I started reading into everything, I was kind of like, oh, let's hear what other people have got to say about this. And now it's obviously back to almost full capacity. What I wanted to ask you, so your channel is called Tips for Travelers, but what would you say are your top tips for travelers? I know that's a big
Uh,
loaded question.
yeah, I mean, my main one is about because I do believe that everybody will like cruising. And lots of people tell me they won't like cruising. But the
Mm,
thing I would say, my biggest tip of all is you've got to get on the right cruise line. If you get on the right cruise line, you will get addicted. So whenever I meet people who haven't been cruising or say, oh, it's not for me, or I'm thinking of going cruising, that's the one thing I really get people to focus on is what do you want? Because you can go to most regions of the world in anything from a massive ship with all the bells and whistles to a ship with just a handful of passengers or whatever. You can go on ships that are party, you can go on ships that are very kind of more academic, whatever.
mm.
So that for me is probably the biggest tip of all is get on the right cruise line. And I think I'm sure there are people that have gone on the right cruise line and still not gone back. But I don't think I've ever met anybody that hasn't sort of followed that. That's probably my main tip. And the second one is probably it's sort of linked to that is about getting the right kind of cabin kind of thing, but it just sort of linked to the first one. It's easy to get on the right line, right ship, right cabin. The second one is also a lot around just understanding kind of budget, because people get very confused around cruises are all inclusive. Well, they know they're not really. It depends what lines you go on. So also
Mm.
getting a sense around budget. And I've met so many people that have gone on cruises and been quite shocked about how much they've had to spend on board.
The
They
hidden
haven't thought about
charges.
gratuities or yeah, the hidden charges. They didn't realize that they had to pay for drinks or whatever. or especially dining or whatever. So that thing of really understanding the budget, because often people, for example, they'll think, oh, I'm going to go on, I can only afford to go on Princess cruises or something. Just that example. They go on Princess in a nice cabin, and they come back and they realize actually if they did the numbers, they could have perhaps gone on a small luxury ship, because actually once you bundle all the costs in and compare it, it may be the same price. So it's that sense of look at from the time you leave the door to the time you get back. That's where you've got to compare costs. So don't just look at, oh my God, that cruise is going to cost me $500, £400 or whatever it is. It might actually really cost you 1,000, because you're going to double that once you get on board. So that's sort of door to door, really understanding that kind of thing. I mean, those are probably my two biggest tips. Yeah.
Oh, those are very good tips. I mean, I actually have never been on a cruise that I wasn't working on. I guess you could
Oh,
argue.
really? Oh, okay.
I guess
Right.
you could argue that I ruined it for myself.
Yeah.
Maybe
But
one
it's
day.
interesting. But it's interesting, talking to who go cruising in their time off, for example, or once they've left, and who's like I met a couple who when I was on Crystal, and most of their time off they go cruising on other ships, partly because they like cruising, but also because they want to see what other lines are doing. They want to see other parts of the world their cruise line doesn't go to. But I've met other people which is like the last thing I want to do is go on a ship for the
Yeah,
months I'm off. And they go hiking into the wilderness kind of stuff.
that's
So
it.
it's interesting. Yeah, yeah.
It's a real mix. Like I didn't do well, like the career path of kind of just staying with one company and working my way up the ranks to cruise director. In the 4 years I was on board ships, I had a different company every other contract, pretty much. So I got to see different parts of the world and get the most, I guess, bang for my buck in terms of experiences in that short 4 year period. So I know what's out there. I know what's being what's offered. If I was ever going to be tempted to work on a ship, but that would be to do like an expedition with like an Arctic expedition or
Right.
something.
Yeah.
That would be
Expedition's
amazing.
fantastic.
Have you ever done
Yeah,
one of those?
expeditions. Yeah, I've been to Antarctica 3 times.
Antarctica.
Antarctica 3 times. Been to the Arctic twice. I went as far by the Arctic. I went to the Canadian Arctic, Greenland,
Amazing.
and I've done the Kimberley expedition of Kimberley in Australia.
What's the most far-flung, remote place you've been to that stands out?
I mean, Antarctica always for me stands out. Although probably even more remote is when I did some of the Canadian Arctic and stuff like that. It's even feels even more remote. It's just the other part of the world. But definitely Antarctica, So the furthest south I've been is the Antarctica Peninsula. In 2027, I'm actually going, which will be the remotest, which is going from New Zealand right to the very bottom of Antarctica, which very few people get to. Only 2,000 people a year
Wow.
get there. So that will be the most remote thing. But at the moment, it's the Antarctic kind of peninsula and then South Georgia, where you do feel you're just miles away from anything, because you are. And that is just incredible.
Ooh,
It's
I bet,
incredible.
yeah, that would be amazing. Don't forget to take your thermals, Gary. That'll be a nippy one.
No, no, yeah, I've got all that gear, yes.
It's the last thing you want right this second. Goodness me. I'm actually going on a
Yeah.
little getaway this weekend with the girlfriend to a place in Essex I've never been to. It's called Cooper's Beach, and it's not a particularly fantastic beach by the looks of things, but a beach is a beach, and I just hope it's not absolutely overly rammed. But I think we're both in London. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm in West London. Yeah, yeah.
You're a West London. I'm Northwest. Whereabouts are you?
Chiswick.
Chiswick. Oh, okay. I'm over in Colindale. We're basically neighbours.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
What I was going to say, because you said in your email to me that your niche, if you like, is your audience is mostly 70% 50 and over, and you cover cruising from the angle of premium to ultra luxury, which is a fantastic niche. But I wanted to ask you, what is potentially like the most ridiculous display of wealth you've ever encountered at sea from somebody? I don't know, because I've worked with Silver Sea
There,
in the
there, there
past.
is there is one. It's from my very early days
Mm,
of cruising. So we went. In fact, it was the first proper sort of cruise, that's more of a crossing that I ever did, was on QE2, the old Cunard QE2, and it was a transatlantic where we were crossing from Southampton to New York, and it was the middle of winter, so it was very rough and stuff. But there was this couple who I think was sort of linked ultimately to Disney, the Disney family in some way.
Hmm.
But they what they did is on the QE2 at the very top was where they'd had their sort of Queen's Grill suites and stuff. And I'd actually booked a cabin, a lower Queen's Grill cabin, but the price has gone down and we managed to get up to this top area. But at the very end were the two biggest suites on the ship. And what we discovered was that this couple, they booked both of them for the whole world cruise, which at that time would have been about £500,000. And that's sort of like back in 2005. So I don't know what that is equivalent now, but they would literally book it out. So what they would do is they would then also bring on board these massive trunks of clothes, which they would then, during the world cruise, they would have every week a trunk brought up with that week's clothes and a trunk taken away. But they would during the day, they would spend time together and they would then go and sleep separately. But they actually had another cabin where all the clothes were stored as well. So they basically had these three cabins.
A walk-in cabin.
A walk-in cabin. But then also they were very eccentric, and they used to have in the dining table, they had this massive table, just the two of them, which every dinner would have all these little miniature characters on, which are mostly Disney characters, which made me think they were linked to Disney. But their display would change most nights. So clearly, I mean, they had just enormous amounts. I don't know how many world cruises they've done, but it's like that they've been on multiple. So they were spending, I guess, in today's money, 750, 1,000, a million, probably doing that. That was probably the most, and we were just like couldn't get our heads around.
Yeah, it sounds like something.
So when you've got that much money, you can buy the two biggest cabins on the QE2 plus one for your stuff. Just like mind-boggling. Yeah,
that sounds like it's been lifted off the pages of the Titanic film. Just
exactly.
As you say, with
exactly.
the trunks, the tiara and the safe, having everything in the safe. What I don't get is in some of these films, Gary. They did a remake of the Poseidon Adventure.
Oh yes, yeah.
And then the guy's cabin has got a stairwell.
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever stayed in a room with a stairwell on a ship?
No, I've only ever seen. No, I have. No, I've toured some which is
because they are rare.
On Royal Caribbean they have the Royal Caribbean lofts, I think they're called, where they have downstairs and the stairs up to the beds up there and on. So people who follow the channel. Once when I was on Celebrity Edge, they had one of their lofts, which was like a 2-level thing. And then I've peeked my head in the Queen Mary 2 biggest suite has like a slightly circular staircase. But I've never stayed in one. I've never stayed in one on that has staircases in. Yeah. But I haven't seen. Have you seen? There's a show made about doctors on a cruise ship.
Oh yes, I haven't watched it, but it's very American. It's a very American.
It's very American. I think it's an Apple, and I don't have Apple. I've got all the others, but I haven't got Apple.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's called Doctor something, and that just looks bizarre because they've got massive cabins. Even the crew cabins are enormous. And, it's very unrealistic.
Even the crew have balconies.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like huge and yeah.
As well, it's like that with even like I haven't watched much of it, but the Love Boat, that was quite disjointed experience as far as watching some of that and going, it wasn't like that at sea. There was a show on BBC called Wreck, which was like a comedy horror. I don't know if you.
I started watching that. I couldn't get into that. I know what you mean.
It was really. I met the guy who played the main actor on a TV set, and I said, "Who was the guy that wrote the series? Did he actually work on ships?" And he said, "No." I was like, "Yeah, I thought so." But it was like, do you remember that film Hostel, where the richest people this is a spoiler alert, by the way. Sorry for anyone listening, but Hostel's a trilogy, and it's about the super elite rich who basically pay for backpackers and the likes to be abducted, and then they torture them to death, right? And then they're gone.
Okay, no, I haven't seen that. No.
Wreck was trying to do something similar, but it was a comedy horror. So that in the last episodes of Wreck, this is the spoiler. It's discovered that there's like a locked off deck which is not in use, and that's basically like the riches hunting ground where they'll basically have
Okay.
like a loose crew member that they'll go around trying to shoot or something. It's just a nonsense show. But there have been loads of TV shows and films and stuff. I've covered quite a few of them. We don't need to go into that. What I wanted to ask you was, I saw you have like a disclaimer about not buying art at sea, and I know the reasons why, but I think that's an important one as well for you to go into a little bit more for some people.
Yes, I mean, I've never really understood the whole art at sea thing. And I know it used to be pitched very much as this is an investment. But I think what people have realized is in reality, a lot of that stuff that you're buying is prints rather than kind of some incredible art. I've noticed now that when they do the art auctions, I guess the restrictions have become clear. They do have to spiel off everything around this not being an investment and all that stuff. But it's really important. I always say to people like, you've got to understand you buy it because you like it, not because you think you're making an investment. And I have had people contacting me with the videos they made around that where their grandparents or parents would have bought this art sort of as an investment. Then when they've passed away, people got it valued and it's not really worth very much. But it's interesting, so just avoid getting sucked into thinking you're making some incredible investment. Just buy it because you like it. But it's obviously huge business because they've, particularly on these bigger ships, it's massive. Even though I was on Sky Princess recently, and they would do these massive big auctions with loads of art, and it's very interesting because what they do, I've seen they do. There's two main companies that do it. One is Park West, which is on most of the more
Yes.
US-based ships, and then there's Clarendon Fine Art, which tends to be on things like Cunard and or UK-based. But it's very interesting because I saw them because I like going to the art auctions, so I find it quite interesting / amusing. But you just have to bear in mind these guys or gals are incredible salespeople. They know all of the tricks of the trade. And what I've noticed they do now is they run through all these terms and conditions very sort of because they do. But then what they always do is they start with the auctions where they have a piece of art which is worth a lot of money, and they will supposedly auction this art with a reserve price of $25,000 or something, which of course no one bids on. Then they do another piece of art which is say $10,000. Nobody bids on. Then they do another piece of $5,000, which nobody bids on, or whatever.
Yeah.
Then they bring all the other stuff. So they've all in people's mind. They've got the sense of this is really serious kind of art stuff, and yeah. So
Yeah.
I just think it's a bit
They lull you into a
proceed with caution.
false sense of security.
Yeah, but I mean it's massive. So when I was on Symphony of the Seas, I did two Symphony of the Seas, one in Med and one in the Caribbean, quite close to each other. I mean, they would take over one of the main dining rooms for their art auctions. It was rammed full with people. It was incredible, like just how people go crazy.
Yeah.
For buying art. Yeah.
I mean, Park West, they're mostly on. I think they're mostly on Carnival, and I worked with alongside some art auctioneer people on some of their ships a while back, and half of them didn't know anything about art. They were just reading from a script. They'd cram the night before, and they'd do, a fair bit of money in selling stuff.
Yeah.
But they didn't know much about it, and they just, as you say, great salesmen.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So watch out, people.
I mean, I am quite fortunate because I don't get seasick and I quite like rough seas. So I'm slightly
me
weird.
too.
So when we've been crossing like Drake Passage or when we did that crossing on QE2 on transatlantic, the ship waves are coming over the front of the ship. I actually find that very thrilling and exciting. Other people get kind of more nervous or sick or whatever. So I kind of just enjoy. I actually enjoy that, luckily. So I haven't been in any kind of things that have felt really kind of scared, even though, of course, I've watched Titanic and Poseidon Adventure stuff. But I know that fundamentally ships are pretty stable, kind of.
Well, yeah.
So I've never really been that scared. I'm trying to think of.
What about on excursions, maybe, because that's not on the ship.
Yeah, no, the only time I've really been scared, I think, is probably when I went when I did a South African cruise and we were in Durban overnight. And so I'd gone out on an excursion on the first day, which was fine, and we did all excursion stuff and whatever. And we've gone up, saw some tribal dancing and that stuff. But the next day I decided I was going to do more self-exploring. And so I headed out, they had like a shuttle bus to the end of the sort of beach area. And then I sort of walked out in the beach area. And then I felt really nervous because there was a lot of kind of homeless people. And of course, in South Africa, poverty is a big issue.
Yeah.
Crime's a big issue. And even though I was on the beachfront, I was sort of by myself, and there was these sort of homeless people, and people quite threatening, who started following me, and sort of like I was trying to avoid them. Went onto the beach, and they came onto the beach. Went off the beach, they went off the beach, and there was no sort of anything kind of nearby. It was bright daylight, but there was no sort of shop or thing that I could. And that's the first time I felt really kind of exposed and kind of dangerous. And they did sort of follow me, and I just walked fast. Luckily, being tall and with long legs, I can walk quite fast. And eventually, I sort of just kind of scurried away. And it was interesting because afterwards, when I saw people about, they're like, "Oh my God, we tell people not to go off exploring by yourself in Durban." It's like it's one of the places. Like even the crew members saying to me, they would never go off exploring by themselves. They would always arrange to have a taxi taking them to a very specific place. They go to more, So that was kind of like that's the only time where I hadn't really sort of thought it through, which kind of reinforced my, do better research. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because let's go back, because obviously I read your About You page on your website, and you said that you had like lived in South Africa for many years and never been to Table
Zimbabwe,
Mountain. You'd never been to Table
yeah.
Mountain.
Yeah. So I grew up in Zimbabwe, and I'd been to South Africa a few times and stuff, but yeah, I'd never been to places like Table Mountain and stuff. Yeah.
And it was one of the best places. Oh, Victoria Falls, that's your favorite.
Victoria Falls is my favorite place in the world.
Done my research.
Absolute favorite. Yeah. Yeah, Victoria Falls is just magical. Yeah, because I went there as a little kid, different sort of ages. I mean, I haven't been there for a long time now, but yeah, it's just magical. So my travel agent, she's actually at Victoria Falls at the moment, and she's been sending me these pictures, which is sort of exciting and annoying at the same time.
Yeah, you've already seen
it's magical. Yeah, but it's magical. It's an incredible place.
It's not like she's sending you spoiler alerts. You've seen it.
Exactly. No, exactly.
I was thinking to myself, like, this weekend, I've never been to Cooper Beach, but I don't have great expectations for a beach in Essex. I don't think it's going to blow me away. I've been to the Seychelles. I've been to Bali. I've been to Bora Bora. So I'm not really going to be like, wow. But I probably was like, do I want to look it up? Do I want to look at pictures, or do I just want to see if I'm pleasantly surprised?
See what it is, yeah.
Yeah. And so I've kind of held off on doing any planning because, unlike yourself, Gary, sometimes I think that when I do make plans, they invariably go wrong. And then I'm annoyed at myself because the plan I made didn't go to plan. So if I don't plan, anything that happens is a bonus because it wasn't expected.
Right.
It seems to work for the most part, but the girlfriend is an over planner massively. Like, she'll pack a week in advance, most probably. But going back, because you said you were born in Zimbabwe and then you moved over here relatively early. But back when you were born, I read it was still called Rhodesia at that time.
Yeah, I mean, when I was born, it was Southern Rhodesia in reality. So it was part of, you had Northern Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia, then Northern Rhodesia became Zambia, and Southern Rhodesia became Rhodesia, yes. And then it became Zimbabwe in 1980. I'd left by then, but it became Zimbabwe in 1980.
I was going to ask you that. When did it become Zimbabwe? I know a little bit about the reason why it was called Rhodesia. Do you know anything about Mr. Cecil Rhodes?
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, when we were at school, we had lots of history about Cecil John Rhodes. And
I was curious about this because from a history standpoint, in certain places, they tell history differently to the people living within that country, just to kind of make you feel a little bit more, I guess, at peace with some of the stuff. Like, do they greenwash you? Or not greenwash, obfuscate certain truths? Because I know
I think
a statue that was being pulled down or protested about being pulled down in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, no. So when I was growing up, I mean, it was still kind of white, kind of minority kind of rules. So the history was probably much more pro Cecil John Rhodes, and would tell more story of how he made all his money in Kimberley, and then he had the vision of Cape to Cairo Railway, and had been quite pioneering and stuff. So that was kind of, then I'm sure that the history changed. I suspect the schools in Zimbabwe don't talk that much about Cecil John Rhodes. So people probably don't even know the history of that much of the history. But certainly, when we were little, because when I grew up, when we were little, we lived in Bulawayo, and his grave is on the top of this Metopus, which is like a rocky climbing kind of area. And his grave is on the top of this big sort of mountain thing. We'd often go climbing and stuff there. But then there was a big statue of him in the middle of the road, and which outside, it's outside, I can't remember, outside the court or something, which I
Mm.
think is still there. I think it's still there. But you're right. And then on Oxford University, there's a big argument about his statue coming down or not coming down, which it hasn't come down. Yeah.
Mm. No, just because, in a nutshell, he profiteered off of people mining gold and diamonds, kind of on his behalf, which he sold and made a lot of money. So,
Oh, a lot of money. A
yeah,
lot of money. Yeah.
yeah, generational wealth of his family are pretty set for life, I'd imagine. But that was
Yeah, I don't know.
a long, long time ago, and I saw Rhodesia at the top of your About Me page, and it just sparked the imagination of, hey, maybe it doesn't all have to be DeckTales this, DeckTales that. Maybe we can do a little bit of
That's sort
history
of
as
history.
well, just to kind of
Yeah.
round off season two. You went on from living in Zimbabwe to come back to, or you were back and forth between London and Zimbabwe, but then you did do military service for 18 months.
Yeah, no, so what happened was I went to junior school and high school in Zimbabwe. Then I did a military service,
That was it. And
which was compulsory. So I was originally supposed to do 2 years. It was 2 years at that time, but then the war, the kind of the civil war, ended during
yeah,
that process. So I came out after 18 months, I think it was, because they basically got rid of military service because the war ended. That civil war ended, and they began the process to transition and do proper majority one man, one vote elections and stuff. So
mm,
then when I finished that, then I went to university. So then I was able to go and do my studies. And then after that, then I briefly in South Africa, went to university in South Africa, and then briefly worked and then moved back to the UK from there.
and then you went back to the UK, and then after a bit of study and a bit of shopping around, you landed a job at well, Johnson and Johnson's.
Johnson Johnson, yes, I was at Johnson Johnson for like 20 something years. Yeah, yeah,
That's the main bulk of your experience.
yeah,
in
yeah.
a sense, right? And I saw what made me laugh a little bit, Gary, was that you were part of the baby marketing
Yeah, yeah. So
team.
I most of my career, I looked after Johnson's baby products. So when I first started, I was like a product manager on Johnson's Baby, and then became marketing director in the UK. Then I looked after Johnson's Baby in Europe. Then I looked after Johnson's Baby globally,
Yeah.
and then so I was in charge of that, and I rolled into taking that brand into China and stuff like that, and rolling around the world. But then I switched into skincare side. So then I used to look after more skincare stuff. And then the latter part of my career, I was in charge of Rock, which is a French anti-aging brand. I was also involved in kind of everything to do with that marketing and the product development and stuff, and then rolling that around into certain countries around the world. And that's what I was doing when I left. Yeah.
Okay. What I wanted to ask you, Gary, was were you the brains behind the No More Tears marketing
No,
campaign?
unfortunately, that was already in place. That was enormous. That No More Tears was huge.
I
But no, that
remember
was
it.
already in place when I did that. Yeah, yeah,
I
it was
remember that
huge.
as a
That was
baby, as a young little
yeah.
Sam Catlin. I remember being in the bath and having No More Tears, Johnson and Johnson's baby shampoo in my
Yeah.
eyes. And I've got to say, Gary, there were a few tears.
Only because it was in your eyes rather than that sound.
Well, yeah,
No,
so
it was
but
huge. That No More Tears
that's what I don't get. It's like no more tears, but if you get it in your eyes, then there are tears. But why would you say there's no more tears if it's going to cause you upset anyway? I don't get it.
Yeah.
It's just obviously one of those campaigns where I guess it's obviously like it's stupid if you eat one of those Ariel. They've now got warnings on the packages of these, Ariel for the
Oh
dishwasher.
yeah, it says don't
Don't
eat
eat
within
it.
reach of children. Yeah.
Don't eat
Yeah.
these you know pods that are obviously designed to clean your clothes. Don't let kids eat them because they look colourful. But yeah, so you weren't part of the brains behind the No More Tears campaign. That's fair enough. But you went on from you had a bit of a cancer scare, I believe,
Yeah.
right? And that was back in 2012.
Yeah, yeah. So that's when I stopped, when I decided to stop working full time. Yeah. So I was diagnosed with cancer and then I had chemo and stuff. So I'm in remission from that now. So it hasn't been cured, but I'm in remission. So touch wood, that's been a long time now.
It
Way
has,
longer
yeah,
than the doctors thought it would be. Yeah.
of course, yeah. So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, so but you were traveling a lot for work, but not like doing your cruising and stuff back then, or were you starting it?
No, I was doing more. I was just doing more socially then. So then, yeah. So then I'd always planned to retire when I was 55 was my plan, and I was not quite 55 then when I got diagnosed with cancer. So then I decided that I was going to stop working anyway. So because then I started getting my pension like when I was 55. I think it was 53 or 54 when I had cancer. So after the chemo, then I decided I was going to stop working full time. Because it obviously changes your perspective. And also at the time when I was diagnosed, it was like we can put it into remission, but the longest anyone's been in remission is about 5 to 7 years. So it's most likely that it'll come back quite quickly. So I was like, well, I'm not going to go back to work full time. So that's when I started to think I'm going to focus more on doing my blogging and stuff. And then after a while, it's also when about 2018, I thought, well, so far it hasn't come back, so I'm going to double down and really get stuck into it. So it's quite interesting. I still go every 6 months for checkups and blood tests and all that sort of stuff. And the consultant's always like surprised that I've been in remission so long because it's unusual. So that's good.
Well, there must be something in the water on these cruise ships you're going on all the time.
Well, exactly. I do think part of it is, I do think a lot of it's to do with attitude. I mean, obviously it's looking after yourself. So I do lots of exercise and eat healthily and blah, blah, blah. But I think you're right. As long as I do think having a purpose and enjoying what you do, it has to help because I love what I'm doing. So that I think that has to help. And you're right, lots of sea air and traveling and excitement and that sort of stuff has to help. That's my theory anyway.
Have you had in your 124 cruises, a favorite cruise or favorite cruise destination that has been
Antarctica? Always, Antarctica.
Always number one.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Always number one by a long way. And I love my second is I love going through the Panama Canal, so that's always high on my list. And third is probably French Polynesia.
Oh yeah,
from Bora Bora. Yeah, that's gorgeous around that.
Tahiti, all that sort of area.
But if there's one, it's Antarctica without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah.
What is it about Antarctica? Just the complete barrenness or the remoteness, like you said, of the location?
I mean, it's partly because no matter what you do, whether you watch videos or documentaries, when you're there, it is even more impressive than you can imagine. Because I was always worried. I was so excited to go that it would be a disappointment, like it wouldn't live up to expectations. But it just exceeded expectations. And it's just, first of all, you have a feeling that you're doing something really special because not that many people go there. Obviously, there's more people going there now overall, but not that many people go there. And it is just so unworldly in a way. It's just, just what you're seeing is you didn't see it anywhere else. And then also the wildlife is phenomenal. So particularly if you get to go to South Georgia, which I've done twice now, I mean, the wildlife is just incredible. You've got colonies of 450,000 penguins in front of you. You go to the next beach late in the afternoon, there's 250,000 penguins. There's massive big elephant seals, on the beach and mating and there's all sorts of seals. And then there's whales that you might see. And so it's just the spectacle of it all. And that sense you're doing something incredible. And I like to go at the beginning of the season, so it's very pristine, lots of ice. And that also feels very special because it's all just sort of reawakening. So all the animals are coming back. It's beginning of mating season. There's kind of this excitement around it. So that's why.
That sounds incredible, man. But you said earlier about how some of these cruises, they'll be like more academic. So you get lecturers and people on board to do talks on certain things. Like if you went to the Antarctica 3 times?
Three times, yeah.
3 times. Did you have lecturers?
3 times, yeah.
Did you have lecturers?
Yeah. So what the expedition lines will do is they'll have an expedition team. So we had about 18 people. So a lot. It's a big team because they're also the ones that drive the Zodiacs when you go out and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, they'll have lots and lots of lectures. So you'll have, normally a marine biologist, a historian, a bird expert, a whale expert, an ice expert, whatever. So there'll be like lectures every day. So what normally happens is you'll have lectures every day about a topic. Then you'll have briefings with what you're going to do the next day because you have a rough schedule, but no one knows. It depends on the ice and stuff has moved. Then every day you'll have a couple of hours or, an hour or two where they'll debrief everything you've seen. So they'll talk about, okay, we saw such and such a bird today, or we saw these orca whales, and they'll explain the whales we saw or whatever. So you'll have this briefing. So yeah, it's amazing because these people are huge experts. And so it's just phenomenal. And you learn so much.
Is there anywhere that you've got on your list of places that you have to go, like on your bucket list of somewhere that you haven't yet been?
You think with all the cruises I've done, my list would get shorter. My list keeps getting longer and longer.
All
So
right.
I mean, I have been to many places, but I've never cruised anywhere sort of in India. So I've never been to India. That's probably the biggest land mass, if you like, that I haven't been to. So I would like to at some point go there. And there weren't that many great cruise options. There's more now. And I would like to do some of the rivers in China and in India as well. So like the Ganges and stuff like that I'd like to do. But there's other things where I've done bits of. So I've cruised parts of Australia, but I'd like to do full circumnavigation of Australia and New Zealand. I don't want to do a whole circumnavigation of Latin America, of South America, but I'm doing that next year. So I've got some of them kind of lined up, but those are probably the main ones. Yeah.
And what's the longest you've been at sea in terms of like consecutive sea days?
The longest cruise I've been on is 7 weeks, but actual sea days.
Yeah,
6.
6. And did you
Yeah.
use Emma? Emma Cruises. She's got the cruise maps thing. The
Oh, the cruise globe. Yeah,
the
yeah,
cruise
yeah.
globe. Sorry, yes, the
Yes,
cruise
yeah.
globe. Have you used that yet? Have you been? I saw
Yes,
it.
yeah. It's great. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, it's good. Good. Yeah. I mean, the problem is because they only do at the moment they can only do cruises after 2015 because of the data. I know they're working on that, but also I haven't got because you obviously need to do that. You need to know the ship, the embarkation point, and the dates it started and the dates it ended. So I've kept a list of all my cruises, but I haven't always kept start date and end date. So I've only got I think 50 cruises in there of the 100 and something I've done at the
Mm.
moment. But it's great. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's
And I
good.
do have some of the maps as well. The printed out maps. I've got some of those as well. Yeah.
To end on a funny note, I know you sort of talked a bit about, sorry, just to go back, the ridiculous display of wealth by some of the guests on board. Have you seen any like really unwarranted, just entitled behavior that you've called out or had to sort of calm people down on trips or excursions or anything like that?
I don't think I have actually.
That's very surprising.
Which is very surprising. I've seen a lot of annoying people, which my biggest the thing that drives me crazy on cruises, but it's true of everywhere, is FaceTime calls and watching thing without earphones in. That's my thing that drives me crazy.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, like on cruises now, it's just all over the place. No matter whether you
really.
go top end or you go whatever. Like I was on Sun Princess, which got off on the weekend or whenever it was, and it was to do my head in because everywhere you went, people were like doing FaceTime calls, listening to TikTok.
Whilst they're walking
It
around the
just
ship.
drives me crazy. Yeah, or just sitting there in a bar doing it. It's like drives me crazy.
I can't even
But I think it's
imagine
just
that.
what. But if you're on a bus, people do it. If you like,
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
thing that
yeah.
drives you crazy. And I'm not good enough at saying don't do it.
Excuse me.
I wish I had more courage to do that. But you never know that you're going to get thumped or something if you do it. Because
No,
so many people do it now. I think it's become like the norm. That's the only thing that does my head in.
not in my day. I mean, like I said, I finished in 2010, so that's when smartphones started to get really smart. But no one was walking around with a phone
Yeah.
and FaceTiming people back then. And I know Peter Knego, the historian I had the pleasure of interviewing a few weeks ago. He was talking about how the observation decks and the places where it would normally be a nice place to just kind of sit, relax, and watch. They're now being taken up by like revenue generating spaces, and
Yeah.
that's the sort of sad side of the business where it's kind of less about just enjoying being at sea and trying to always make money and capitalize on the entrapment of guests at sea.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
it's the business of cruising, and we're not going to change the way they operate. I guess they're a bit less like that when you've spent thousands of pounds on a ticket for an expedition. They're like, maybe now
Yeah.
we've got enough of their money for the time being. Let them
Yeah.
enjoy the
There's no.
cruise.
Yeah. There's none. Yeah. There's no sell. No.
But when they're paying, I don't know, like $50 for a week's cruise on something stupid like, I don't know, some of these companies, they can charge ridiculously low prices for people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And and
Yeah.
then and then they're obviously within their rights to try to get
Sell,
more
sell,
out of them.
sell.
Sell, sell, sell. But so what's your next cruise? You said you've got one coming up. It's the river cruise.
So my next cruise is the river cruise. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my
And
next one.
where's that going again?
So it's a Rhine River cruise from Amsterdam to Basel. And then
Amsterdam to,
to Basel in Switzerland.
oh yes,
Or yeah.
Basel.
But then Basil,
I don't know.
Basel, yeah. And then after that, for the rest of the year, I'm back on some ocean cruises. Quite ones I'm really looking forward to. Much longer. I'm doing sort of longer ones now. So I'm doing a 3-week repositioning from Alaska to Japan, with lots of Japan ports I haven't been to, and then I'm doing the whole west coast of Africa for a month at the end of October. So that should be great.
Amazing. Oh wow,
Yeah, so looking forward to it.
you've got a few weeks till you go on the river cruise, or is it what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, it's about 2.5 weeks time, something like that.
And what are you going to do till then?
I'm trying to catch up and get ahead of all my scripts and enjoy the weather.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Gary, I'll leave you to it because it is a nice day out
Great,
there still. It was lovely to meet you, sir. Thank you so much for coming on DeckTales,
great,
and I wish you all the best with your future cruises.
great. You too, and thanks very much for having me.
Thank you. Nice one.
Great, thanks.
Cheers,
Take
mate.
care.
Take care.
Bye.
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 So there you have it. That wraps it up for this episode of DeckTales. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've been entertained by the tales of laughter, camaraderie and the occasional stormy sea, then don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment. There are lots of other shows out there to compete with, so if you are enjoying DeckTales, why not help us out by going over to Spotify or Apple and dropping us a 5-star rating. This will boost the show's visibility and help to attract new listeners every week. Before I sign off, if you'd like to share your own stories for future episodes, then I'd love to hear from you. Simply get in touch over the socials, because after all, the best stories often come from our listeners. As we navigate through the waters of life, remember to enjoy the journey as much as the destination, as well as those you choose to share the adventure with. I've been your Captain Sammy Catlin. Until next time, fair winds, smooth sailing, and may your adventures be as unforgettable as those shared here on DeckTales. Bon voyage!